Gurdeep, over to you, sir.
Brethren, good morning, good afternoon, and a good evening to you all. It is wonderful to see so many of you joining us here today. As always, I shall start with the important housekeeping notices. The meeting is being recorded and will be posted onto our YouTube channel. Therefore, those of you who do not wish to be seen, please feel free to turn your video off. To avoid any disruptions during the talk, could you please ensure that your microphones are kept on mute throughout? There will be a Q&A session after the talk. If you'd like to ask today's speaker a question, please use the hand up icon, which can be found in the participants or reactions tab on Zoom. Once you have done this, please wait for your name to be called out. You may then unmute yourself, ask your question, but please do not forget to mute yourself again. To save your spot in the queue, you can do this at any time during the talk. I would also like to remind brethren to please keep to questions regarding the topic of the talk and to avoid making any statements. This also includes the chat area. As always, we're giving away 2 of our bespoke Freemasons Without Borders mugs. For a chance to win, please answer the following question. What do the initials TI stand for in a lodge name? Please type your answer in the chat section, and the first 2 correct answers will win. Brethren, it is my pleasure to introduce to you Worshipful Brother Andrew Farley. Andrew has been in Freemasonry since 1995. He is a past master of the Temple of Athene Lodge number 9541, the Research Lodge of Middlesex, and currently holds the office of Provincial Grand Orator for Middlesex. He manages a team of over 30 Masonic speakers, which give lectures to the lodges in both Middlesex and London. Andrew is currently a senior visiting officer in the Metropolitan Grand Lodge of London and an adjunct to a Metropolitan Grand Inspector in the Royal Arch. Freemasonry is an important part of his life, and he really enjoys researching and presenting popular and non-highbrow lectures. Some of his lectures include Witchcraft, the Occult and Freemasonry, The Hidden Secrets of the Royal Arch Tracing Board, How to Learn Ritual, Can an Old Dog Learn New Tricks, and many more. Andrew is married and has 6 children and numerous grandchildren, and runs a successful manufacturing company in Bedfordshire. Andrew is also trustee of a charity affiliated to the RMBI Care Home, the Association of Friends of Prince Michael of Kent Court, based in Watford, Hertfordshire. Worshipful Brother Andrew, the virtual floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. Lovely to be with you. We have 275 people watching this live, and I'm sure there'll be lots more. I'm going to share my screen with you now, so please bear with me as I do that. A second, I hope you can see that clearly. Good, I believe you can, so I'll just bring up my thing. Okay, I hope you can see the screen clearly. Masonic Conspiracy Theories, more than a grain of truth. Now, since the late 18th century, there have been hundreds of conspiracy theories described about Freemasons. Now, generally, these tend to form into 3 main categories. Political, usually alleging control or manipulation of governments. Religious, alleging anti-Christian or satanic practices. And cultural, alleging involvement in the fabric of ordinary daily life and society. Now, often Freemasonry has been connected with worship of the devil based on misinterpretations of Masonic doctrines. Now, in researching this paper, I sought to find out the true breadth of these conspiracy theories and whether there could have been any solid reason why these theories should have been promulgated. Now, one of the most interesting features of the research was that the main conspiracy theories that circulate today are centered around American Masonry. There is little information about conspiracy theories closer to home, wherever that home may be. Now, obviously, I wrote this paper bearing in mind that I was going to deliver most of this to UK Masons, and therefore I focused on the United Kingdom in particular. Now, the best known example of conspiracy theory is the one about the New World Order. Prominent statesmen such as Woodrow Wilson in the United States and Winston Churchill in Great Britain both used the term New World Order, referring to a brief period in history which involved dramatic changes in world political thought, particularly after the First and Second World Wars. Now, these periods were seen by these leaders as opportunities to implement significant ideological changes in global governance, moving outside individual nation states' concept of government to an idea of a world government. Now, of course, these ideas spawned NATO, the GATT Treaty, that's the General Agreement of Tariffs and Trade, the United Nations, all of which were designed to ensure world peace and maintain the balance of power in favor of the United States, as well as promoting world cooperation. Now, between the years 1947 and 57, the Canadian conspiracy theorist William Guy Carr began to influence thinking on an international communist conspiracy, mainly in the United States, and spread unfounded fears that the Freemasons, the Illuminati, and the Jews were behind such a conspiracy. The theories suggested that these groups were trying to form a godless communism world and spawned many offshoot conspiracies, mainly centering around the concept of a communist one world government. Now, Freemasonry, being one of the world's oldest secular fraternal organizations, has been a natural target for conspiracy theorists. It's said that Freemasons have had hidden political agendas and are conspiring to bring about a new world order, a world government organized to Masonic principles and run only by Freemasons. Now, the Protocols of the Elders of Zion was published in 1903 in Russian, alleging a Judeo-Masonic conspiracy to achieve world domination. The text purported to be secret minutes of a cabal of Jewish masterminds who were also Freemasons and were plotting to rule the world because they believed themselves to be the chosen people of God. Now, these protocols have since been proven to be a complete hoax and a clear case of plagiarism, with prominent Irish journalist Philip Graves in a 1921 article in the Times and a British academic, Norman Cohn, in his 1967 book, Warrant for Genocide, both proving the falsehood of the work. Now, the original allegation of a conspiracy theory within Freemasonry to subvert religions and governments in order to take over the world can be traced back to a man called John Robison, whose reactionary conspiracy theories influenced outbreaks of Protestant anti-Masonry in the United States during the 19th century. Now, Leo Taxil, someone you may have heard of, is a pseudonym for Marie Jogan Page, who was a French writer who wrote a series of pamphlets and books in the 1890s, demonizing Freemasonry, charging Freemasons with worshipping Lucifer as a supreme being. And even though Taxil later admitted that his claims were all a hoax, they were and still are believed by numerous conspiracy theorists today, having a great impact on subsequent anti-Masonic claims about Freemasonry. Now, the hoax material is actually still published today by Chick Publications, a Christian evangelical publishing house called The Curse of Baphomet, and a book called Cult and Ritual Abuse, which is about satanic ritual abuse, written by Randy Noblet, and that also still cites the Taxil hoax. Now, it's common knowledge that the two two of the founding fathers of the United States, George Washington and Benjamin Franklin, were both Freemasons. And there was speculation that the sacred geometric designs belonging to Freemasonry were somehow interwoven into the very fabric of American society, such as the Great Seal of the United States in imprint on the $1 bill, in architecture, and the layouts of the streets and highways of Washington, D.C. as some part of a master plan. Now, accordingly, colonial American Freemasons were portrayed as using power of the occult to bind their planning of a government in conformity with the plan of a Masonic God, because their belief in the great architect of the universe suggested that they planned to establish the kingdom of God on earth, a Masonic world government with New Jerusalem as its capital city, and the third temple at its most holy site. And this utopian new world order presided over by a Masonic Messiah. Now, of course, all these claims are vigorously rebutted by Freemasons. It was pointed out that in Freemasonry, the drawing of symbols, however large, has absolutely no part of our principles, and certainly not to try and consolidate or establish any controlling power. Now, there's absolutely no published information that the final designers of the Great Seal, shown here, were ever Freemasons, and that the words Novus Ordo Seclorum, which appeared on the back of the Great Seal, that's the one on the right, in 1782, and on the back of the $1 bill since 1935, literally translates as the new order of the ages, and alludes to the beginning of an era where the United States became an independent nation state. Now, unfortunately, this is mistranslated by conspiracy theorists as New World Order, nice and convenient, and has been redirected towards Freemasonry. The fact that there have been at least 14, probably more, US presidents who were Freemasons or are Freemasons serves to make people both curious and suspicious of the Brotherhood. Now, you'll also note the inclusion of the pyramid and the all-seeing eye simply serves to perpetuate the myth of Masonic aspirations. Now, with reference to King Solomon's temple, the suggestion that Freemasons wanted to establish or wished to establish a third temple in Jerusalem, Masons argue that they've got no interest whatsoever in rebuilding the temple, as its situation on the Temple Mount would interfere with the delicate situation relating to those who also stake a claim on that site. And it would likely be the ignition point for the mother of all religious wars. So I mentioned the three areas of conspiracy, the first being political. Now, with the exception of the clandestine Masonic organizations, such as the Grand Orient of France, Freemasonry does not usually condone or allow political discussion within its precepts. And therefore, it's hard to believe that any part of Freemasonry would or could try to influence governments politically. Now, Trevor McKeown, a Masonic researcher, argued that it is implausible that Freemasons would want to establish a Masonic government, as while certain Masonic landmarks are agreed between the various sovereign Grand Lodges, these organizations do not agree on many other points of belief and practice, and that many famous Freemasons held and hold totally independent beliefs that span the spectrum of politics. The term Masonic government has no meaning at all, since individual Freemasons have a wide variation and difference of opinion amongst themselves as what constitutes good government. Conspiracy theorists suggest that the Freemasons have somehow infiltrated government agencies and are taking over by stealth. Now, whilst it cannot be denied that there are many Freemasons who are engaged in government agencies and departments worldwide, or even at the heart of government, it beggars belief that anyone could seriously contemplate that Freemasons have the desire to control the world. We can't even control where we are, let alone controlling the world. Now, there's been wild speculation in the judiciary worldwide that it is heavily infiltrated by Masons who give their fellow Masons the benefit of the doubt in court, subverting the legal system. Now, more worrying are claims of institutionalized sexual abuse and violence practiced by modern-day Masons who remain above the law thanks to their connections in high places. Even as recently as 2012, there are websites purporting to be a suggested link between, say, the officers of the North Wales police force in England who tried to hide their involvement in Masonry and the expose of child abuse. Evidence supporting these claims are, of course, as usual, non-existent. Now, it's common knowledge that many police forces, certainly in the United Kingdom, have their own Masonic lodges, and that many policemen and women participate in Freemasonry. In the year 2000, Jack Straw, who was the British Home Secretary, was embroiled in a row about Freemasons in the police and judiciary being forced to disclose their membership of the fraternity. Now, as a result of unspecified fears that Freemasonry had undermined the legal system, there were calls from paranoid members of parliament to force the disclosure of such information in the interest of satisfying public suspicion over the influence of Freemasonry in the criminal justice system. Now, nearly 2/3 of officers in the police refused to cooperate with the voluntary register, and the idea of a compulsory register was eventually dropped because of potential conflicts with the European Convention of Human Rights. It was only the perception of such undue influence that prompted the whole furor. Now, my research also turned up information regarding instructions given by the United Kingdom Ministry of Defence to all serving military personnel in 2001, advising that belonging to an organization of a secretive nature, such as the Freemasons, carried the risk of establishing disparate loyalties, which may have a destabilizing effect on the chain of command, not least by the perception of preferential treatment and undue influence. The instruction went on to advise that serving personnel should not encourage or promote membership amongst their colleagues, and meetings must not take place on Ministry of Defence premises, and use should not be made of any Ministry of Defence property. Now, I'm not quite sure whether this advice to public servants is still valid, but it goes to demonstrate that even governments believe the conspiratorial theories that abound, however unproven and ridiculous in concept. Paranoia and conspiracy theories abound when it comes to Freemasons in public office. There's a whole website devoted to this topic at www.fallingmasonry.info. I found that not only did this site publish a list of public servants who were possibly Masons, but detailed their connection or known record of activity. In particular, there were quite a lot of entries citing Bilderberg participant. Now, I can hear your minds whirring away. Some of you will know what Bilderberg participant is. What's a Bilderberg participant, you ask? Well, let me explain. The Bilderberg group is a conference or club. It's an annual private conference for between 120 and 140 invited guests from North America and Europe, mostly people of influence. About 30% are from government or politics, and 70% are from the world of finance, industry, education, and communications. Its name derives from the original venue of the first meeting held at the Hotel de Bilderberg in Oosterbeek, Netherlands, in May 1954. It was created to establish a forum for people concerned about the growth of anti-Americanism in Western Europe, with the purpose of promoting Atlanticism, a better understanding between the cultures of the United States and Western Europe, and to foster cooperation on political, economic, and defense issues. Now, of course, there were Freemasons who attended these conferences. We had many members of rank and opulence. Unfortunately, there are those who believe in a Masonic conspiracy to take over the world. So it's not really surprising to find that there is a conspiratorial link that has been suggested between Freemasonry and Bilderberg. In 2013, the annual Bilderberg Conference, for those of you here in the UK, was held at the Grove Hotel, Watford, Hertfordshire. Now, past attendees have included Bill Gates, Warren Buffett, George Soros, Ken Clark, George Osborne, David Cameron, and many more. Now, there's a theory that Freemasonry somehow overlaps with the Illuminati, especially at very high levels within the organization. The claim is that the Illuminati, Freemasons, secretly control many major aspects of society and government and are working to establish a new world order. Here we go again, new world order. Included in the conspiracy are the Knights Templar and the Jews as part of their plan for universal control of society. Now, this particular conspiracy theory was described as early as 1792 by multiple authors, both in France and Scotland. Now, recent books by the author Dan Brown serve to stoke up old and very, very discredited links between Freemasons and the Illuminati and reignite the conspiracy theories about the secret activities of Freemasons. For interest, the Illuminati was a secret society founded by Adam Weishaupt, a Jesuit monk in 1776 in Upper Bavaria, Germany. Now, the meaning of the word Illuminati is actually bearer of light. Now, this movement consisted of advocates of free thought, secularism, liberalism, republicanism, and gender equality. Many of those are Masonic principles. The group's ideology appears to have been based on a random mixing of Rosicrucianism, Kabbalistic mysticism, Gnosticism, Jesuit organization, and even Masonry, which appears to have elements of Egyptian mysticism and Babylonian cosmology. Now, recruitment actually took place in German Masonic lodges, who sought to teach rationalism through mystery schools. Now, the main aim of the Illuminati was to make people happy, and people were supposed to become happy by becoming good. Now, this was supposed to be achieved by enlightening them and getting them to reject the domination of superstition and prejudice. It is said that the part of enlightening process was the elimination of Christianity, and by placing members at the heart of governments and institutions. Now, in 1785, the order was infiltrated, broken up, and suppressed by government agents using preemptive tactics to neutralize the perceived threat of the brotherhoods, ever contemplating the overthrow of the Bavarian monarchy and its Roman Catholic state religion. Now, another political conspiracy theory claim is that the Freemasons secretly plotted to create a society based on the revolutionary ideals of liberty, equality, fraternity, separation of the church and state, and in Nazi Germany, a Jewish plot for religious tolerance. Now, the Freemasons are also being accused of being involved in the assassination of John F. Kennedy, Diana, Princess of Wales, even John Lennon, and that somehow Freemasonry is a Jewish or Zionist front for world domination, or is at least controlled by Jews or Zionists for this goal. This is illustrated by, of course, the notorious and fraudulent writings of the Protocols of the Elders of Zion, which we're told is the partial reason that Hitler outlawed Freemasonry. Now, this claim is also, believe it or not, revisited by the Palestinian Islamist group Hamas, whose covenant states, and in English it says, Freemasonry is a secret society founded as part of a Zionist plot to control the world. And that's Article 22 of their charter. Now, finally, on the matter of political conspiracy, Freemasons have been included as being behind the invention of income taxes in the United States, with claims that the IRS, the Inland Revenue Services, or whatever it is, and federal income tax are part of a deliberate plot perpetrated by Freemasons to control American people, and of course, eventually the world. G7, great stuff. A further complete set of conspiracy theories exists with regards to religion and Freemasonry. For example, there are those who claim that Freemasons worship Lucifer, based on the writings of a very famous American Mason called Albert Pike, who in 1871 wrote a book called Morals and Dogma of the Ancient and Accepted Scottish Rite of Freemasonry, an 861-page monster of a book in which he wrote these words: Lucifer, son of the morning, it is he who bears the light, and with its splendors intolerable, blinds feeble, sensual, or selfish souls, doubt it not. Now, anti-Masons often quote these three sentences as proof that Freemasons worship Satan. In fact, we have to actually look at the meaning of these words in the light of Albert Pike's background to understand what the author meant when he penned those phrases. Let's talk about Albert Pike a little bit. Now, Albert was born in 1809 in Boston, Massachusetts, in the United States, and he became a writer and poet amongst many other things. He's actually described as a pioneer, a crusader for justice for Native Americans, a practical joker, a reformer, a journalist, a philosopher, a prominent Washington lawyer, and a Civil War general fighting for the Confederate Southern states. The life and times of Albert Pike is probably the subject of a whole paper on its own. Now, I've just chosen to dwell on just a few of the parts of his life that have relevance to this paper. Now, Albert became, as I said, involved in Freemasonry and became very involved in the organization. He was elected Sovereign Grand Commander of the Scottish Rite Southern Jurisdiction in 1859. Now, the Scottish Rite, for those of you who don't know, is a completely separate and totally distinct Masonic organization, having no control over Freemasonry in general. It is an appendant Masonic organization. And at the time of writing this, 20%, no more than 20% of Masons in America had any affiliation with it. Now, many anti-Masonic conspiracy theorists conveniently leave this fact out of their claims and are happy to quote and misquote the words of Albert Pike. Now, the book, Morals and Dogma, and I've shortened the name for the purposes of the paper, contain the ramblings of a clearly highly intelligent and knowledgeable man. Now, Pike's passion was that all men should seek knowledge or the light. He referred to the light as education, and this was often picked up by Christian fundamentalists as they believed that Jesus was the light, and therefore his writings must be anti-Christian, even though the Christian Bible clearly contains positive references to the light as learning. In his book, Morals and Dogma, Pike attempted to pass on to the reader his tremendous knowledge of life. And this resulted in a rather rambling, jumbled and tedious book, which set out Pike's personal view and perceptions on Freemasonry. Now, whilst many of us will agree with some of his statements and proclamations and beliefs, there are many others that he has that no Freemason believes. Now, the most interesting part of the book is, in fact, its preface, which wasn't written by Pike, but is an official statement by the Supreme Council, that's his governing body, who published the work. In order to explain and reinforce that the work contained absolutely no religious dogma, they stated that the teachings of the readings are not sacramental so far as they go beyond the realm of morality into those other domains of thought and truth. The ancient and accepted Scottish rite uses the word dogma in its true sense of doctrine, of teaching, and is not dogmatic in the odious sense of that term. Unfortunately, anti-Masons picked up on the title of the book and automatically assumed that the book contained religious dogma, bringing me back to Albert's statement. Lucifer, son of the morning, it is he who bears the light, and with splendors intolerable, blinds feeble, sensual, or selfish souls. Doubt it not. So what is this reference of Pike to Lucifer, son of the morning? Now, it's interesting to note that in the King James Bible, there were deliberate errors included, in particular, the biblical designation of Lucifer or Satan, along with a story about a fallen angel. Now, Lucifer made his first appearance, not on Netflix, but in the Bible, in the book of Isaiah, chapter 14, verse 12, and nowhere else, reading, "How art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning? How art thou cut down to the ground, which didst weaken the nations?" Now, Lucifer is a Latin name. So how could this find its way into ancient Hebrew manuscript written before there was a Roman language? In reality, chapter 14, verse 12, is actually about a fallen Babylonian king who had persecuted the children of Israel during his lifetime. Now, speculation is that the early Christian scribes writing in Christian Latin wanted the story to be about a fallen angel, a creature not mentioned in the original ancient text, and gave it the Latin name Lucifer. Now, why Lucifer? In Roman astronomy, Lucifer was the name given to the morning star. Now, we know this by another name, Venus. Now, the morning star appears in the sky just before the sun rises and derives its name, its astronomical name, from the Latin term lucem fere, translated of bringer or bearer of light. In Hebrew text, the expression used to describe the Babylonian king before his death was Hellel, and you can see it on the Hebrew writing on the right-hand side, Hellel ben Shahar, which is Hellel, son of Shahar, which best translates as day star or shining star, son of the dawn. So Lucifer is no more than an ancient Latin name for the morning star. And the Hebrew metaphor, day star, son of the dawn, was mistranslated by the early Christian scribes as Lucifer. And over the centuries, Lucifer became the fallen angel or disobedient angel, cast out of heaven to rule eternally in hell. In modern Christian tradition, Lucifer is probably now the same as Satan, the devil, and ironically, Prince of Darkness, complete opposite. So when Albert Pike used those words, Lucifer, son of the morning, he is using a very unfortunate but scholarly term. He's historically correct, but knowing the Christians of his time believed that Lucifer was Satan, or at least before his time, believed Lucifer was Satan, he should have kept his scholarly vocabulary in check. Now, this ties in very neatly with Leo Taxel, who I mentioned earlier in the paper, who used this unfortunate wording to claim that Masons were worshippers of Lucifer and Satan, and caused an immense amount of damage to the reputation of Freemasonry. Moving on. Other religious conspiracy theories include that Freemasonry is its own religion, believing in its own Masonic God, the grand architect of the universe, or in some extreme cases, that Freemasons worship Baal and other idolic gods. It didn't help that early Masonic ritual referred to the God of all things. Unfortunately, that spells goat. And this was quickly changed to the great architect of the universe. Anti-Masonic sentiment can be traced back to Pope Clement XII, who became Pope in 1730 and immediately condemned Freemasonry as being ungodly. Finally, we have the cultural conspiracy theories, which claims that Freemasonry has intertwined its symbols and numerology into modern culture, such as corporate logos and other imagery. Now, my mate Dan Brown, in his books of fiction, suggested that road plans and layouts of certain cities were designed as Masonic symbols on a grand scale, and is believed by many today to be true. Today, numerology is often associated with the paranormal alongside astrology and other similar divinatory arts. We, of course, know these maybe to be ridiculous or as a side issue, but there are those who do believe that Freemasons are dangerous and we are a dark society bent on world domination by stealth. Now, other conspiracy theories suggest that the Apollo moon landings were faked by the Freemasons. William Cooper wrote that Fred Kleinknecht, who was the head of NASA at the time of the Apollo space program, was the sovereign grand commander at the time of the Council of 33rd Degree of the ancient and accepted Scottish Rite of Freemasonry of the Southern jurisdiction. It was his reward for pulling it off. All of the first astronauts were Freemasons. Is this fake?
I'd like to evaluate the various cases that a person can traveling on the list of based on out of your field of view. Is that right, Tom Houston? That's affirmative, Buzz. You're in our field of view now.
So it always gets me that. Now, to refute this particular theory, since 2005, high-definition photos taken by the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter of the Apollo landing sites have captured the landing modules and tracks left by the astronauts. That's the picture on the right. In 2012, these images were released, showing the Apollo flags still standing where they were placed. Now, closer to home, it's also claimed that Jack the Ripper was a Freemason because they discovered a blooded leather apron found near the site of one of his murders, and that the killings resembled a Masonic initiation ritual, and that somehow the Ku Klux Klan are linked to Freemasonry tenuously through the association with Albert Pike, who was a Confederate general in the American Civil War, and that the September 11th atrocities in New York and Washington in 2001 were astrological in nature and resulted from a hidden war between Masons, as the descendants of the Knights Templar, and Islam. So Freemasonry is one of the most popular targets for conspiracy theorists. I wanted to see why Freemasonry should be singled out for this treatment, because Freemasonry promotes a sense of equality amongst men and treats all religions except atheism, although I don't think that's a religion, as equals. And this is often regarded as being anti-Christian, i.e., if you're not with us, you've got to be against us. Now, this lack of respect for religious diversity and religious tolerance should be kept in mind when looking into Masonic conspiratorial claims. Now, because Freemasonry promotes such free thinking, religious leaders, politicians, and especially European royalty have all distrusted Freemasonry, as this free thinking was considered a virtue that they did not want their followers, electorate, or subjects to possess, as they feared it might undermine their power and control. Now, Freemasonry is a secretive order. We have secrets that are only communicated amongst ourselves. We hold our meetings in secret and away from those who are not Freemasons. We don't make financial demands on public funds. We don't seek public support, nor do we seek official or government support. We are truly private. This genuine requirement for privacy causes us to be feared, and ignorant people are ready to imagine all manner of ills that can be attributed to an exclusive group to which they have not been invited to join. For hundreds of years, Freemasons themselves have misunderstood what was meant by Masonic secrecy. Technically, the secrets that Masons are forbidden to discuss with people outside the craft are the signs, tokens, and words of the order, which we use to identify one another, or supposedly. Unfortunately, generations of Masons have taken their obligation of secrecy to mean that they couldn't discuss the fraternity outside our Masonic temples. This has led to the problem that with no information coming from Masons, it's all too easy for people to fill the gaps in their knowledge with incorrect information or just plain lies, particularly if they have a book to sell or to gather subscriptions for their paranoid website. However, I should point out one particular exception. In the period just before the World War II, Adolf Hitler was openly persecuting the Jews, amongst other races, as well as Freemasons. We know this. Now, as I mentioned previously, Hitler believed that Masonry undermined the state and therefore decided to destroy it. Now, whilst there was a possibility that Nazi Germany might invade and occupy Great Britain, a new veil of secrecy descended on Freemasonry, but this time it was prompted by a purely strong survival instinct. For many older Masons today, this veil has never, ever been lifted. Now, we sometimes joke with and tease an initiate that we have a goat used during the ceremony of our initiations. Now, everyone knows that since we had the foot and mouth virus epidemic a number of years ago in Britain, goats are extremely hard to come by. Believe it or not, some people take this joke very seriously, and they use this opportunity to link the suggested use of a goat to Satanism and witchcraft. Crazy? Yes, but it's also believed. Now, there's also a misconception that our Masonic meetings are some sort of bizarre secret worship service, offering up a pagan god, goat, or to Satan himself. Now, this ridiculous notion stems from the time when the Knights Templar were placed on trial and were tortured to confess that they worship Baphomet. And this tenuous link with Freemasonry has remained ever since. Now, there are some other weird and wacky conspiracy theories around, as diverse as that the Freemasons were responsible for the sinking of the Titanic and for Leo DiCaprio's acting during the film, and that they were also responsible for the French, American, and Russian revolutions. It's also suggested that the Freemasons were responsible for the rise of the occult in the late 1800s and early 1900s. Now, Terry Melanson wrote, "The occult revival of the 20th century can be directly attributed to Freemasonry and its peripheral entourage of acolytes. Theosophy, the New Age movement, Satanism, Kabbalistic black magic, Enochian magic, Gardnerian Wicca, Alexandrian Wicca, and sex magic." Now, this particular theory may have a grain of truth in its assumption, as many prominent Freemasons at that time had a more than healthy interest in the occult. Now, I elaborate on that theme in another one of my lectures entitled Witchcraft, the Occult and Freemasonry, which clearly sets out a link between prominent Masons of that time and their connection with the occult. And in particular, the work of Gerald Gardner, shown in the front here, who enjoyed an explosion of popularity for Gardnerian Wiccan witchcraft from the mid-1950s, with the abolition in the United Kingdom on the laws practicing witchcraft. Believe it or not, it wasn't until the mid-50s that witchcraft was no longer a crime. There is another conspiracy theory about Hollywood film and music industry that have been infiltrated by Freemasons. Now, theorists cite imagery found in many music videos. These images are not the usual square and compasses, but are claimed to be putting out a rather more subtle and even more subliminal message. Megastars such as Jay-Z, Rihanna, Nas, and Kanye West are often claimed to have incorporated such messaging with clear references to the Illuminati and the use of our grand and royal sign shown here. Movies are no different. And conspiracy theories claim that the movies, especially science fiction movies, are used by Freemasons to introduce the idea of a one world government. Now, the plot usually revolves around a global alien invasion that the entire world must get together to defeat. Theorists state that these films are used to indoctrinate moviegoers into a belief that a one world government is not only palatable, but a favorable suggestion. Now, it's been suggested that Freemasons have assassins. Now, I'm sure there have been famous and infamous Freemasons who've committed murder, just like there are doctors, policemen, judges, bankers, and politicians that have all committed horrible crimes. We all know that murder, however, is not part of Freemasonry, and people with criminal records or who get a criminal record are usually barred from ever becoming a Freemason, or if they are convicted of such a crime, they're excluded from the order. All of these conspiracy theories that I have mentioned are just that, theories. No one who has suggested a particular conspiracy has any information of substance that can be verified. There's no proof, suggestion of any indication that there's any truth whatsoever to their claims, which was probably founded mainly on ignorance, selective choice of their written words, attributed to Masons and former Masons, fear, and to a degree self-interest. I therefore conclude that there is not one single grain of truth in any of these theories, although they do make great fictional reading. A curator of the library of the Grand Lodge of Scotland, Robert Cooper, once commented on the subject of conspiracies that surround Freemasonry, stated, "I strongly suspect it was our fault. People asked us questions and we didn't answer them because it was none of their business. That's no longer sustainable. But as you can see, the problems it's caused. Because we didn't respond 100 years ago to these allegations, there has been 100 years of belief that we are hiding something, no matter how open we are today." How true. Brethren and people watching today, I hope you've enjoyed my presentation, and I hope that you've understood, and I'm sure you've got questions. And as they mentioned a little earlier, I have many other lectures which I present. If anyone wants any to see it, just give us a shout. My details are available well, in various places. Here's a brief list of my various lectures, as you can see, and there's my email address if anyone quickly wants to write it down. Anyway, enough of that. I'm going to hand back to our hosts, and thank you very, very much for listening to me this evening. Thank you.
Andrew, thank you so much for that intriguing and exciting talk. We will go straight to the questions. First one is Gordon.
Andrew, that's been one of the most interesting talks I've ever seen on this program or on any other. And I'm been a Freemason a long time. Now my question reverts around one of the guys that you hit twice in your talk, and well known to me within my lifetime, is Hitler. And can you explain why Hitler used a Masonic symbol, which he called the polyfoot cross, which he called the swastika, of course? And it's, as far as I'm aware, it's been a Masonic symbol for over 2,000 years. And it's a symbol that I, as a ruler in an order that uses that cross, understand and agree that it's a Masonic symbol. And I'd like to know why he chose it. And when he realized it was a Masonic symbol, he then had to repaint all his millions of tanks and aeroplanes and change it to that, which again is a Masonic symbol. So he went to his death using two Masonic symbols and killed millions of Jews.
Was that a question or was that an answer?
I
don't know.
The question is why he used two Masonic symbols.
That's right. I can be very, very honest with you. After very much research, I have no idea whatsoever. However, what I would say is that Hitler was driven to persecute the Jews and Freemasons. He didn't separate them out deliberately. He deliberately focused on Freemasons for several reasons. Firstly, the Jews were very, very strongly connected with Freemasonry, and the Jews were very involved in finance and corporate governance in Germany at that time. And it was felt by Hitler and his associates that their strength was too great because what they had in mind. So they decided, and they also didn't like the fact that Freemasons believe in freedom of thought. I went through this in the conspiracy theories, so that basically anyone who has the potential for free thought and free thinking was a potential danger to the organization of the Nazis, and that wasn't compatible with them, and therefore they decided to get rid of it. The fact that they used the discredited writings of Leo Taxil and others is incidental. People like Henry Ford, who, the American magnate, actually printed 500,000 copies of that book in English and distributed it in the United States. And just before the war, he was awarded a very high honor by the Nazi government for his work towards their cause. So it's very connected to a degree with anti-Semitism, anti-Masonic sentiment. I don't understand. The actual swastika is actually an Indian symbol. Thousands, you're quite right, it's thousands of years old, but it was just appropriated by the Nazi Party. I don't think there was any real reason why they did it.
Could I just jump in here a minute? Living in Germany, the swastika was used by the German soldiers during the First World War as a symbol of good luck. And we think that that's where it ended up coming on to the Nazis. And then that's most of, well, at the beginning in the Nazi regime, a lot of those people were ex-servicemen from the First World War. I'm not an expert, but that's the story I was told.
However, that isn't, I must say, before we go off on a tangent, this is not strictly speaking connected to the lecture, you know, about the swastika, but it's an interesting point. Thank you very much for mentioning it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gordon. We'll go to Gary Mandel.
Hi, excellent lecture. Just picking up on a few points. Swastika was used as a neutralization device by East, West, and South, that all the points come together and kind of balance out. And Hitler used to steal from other religions to kind of like create a world that would be safe for himself and incorporate a lot of different religions. I saw in your lecture that you had Gardnerian witchcraft. Yeah, I saw next to him you had Aleister Crowley. Crowley used a lot of the Masonic principles. Supposedly he overcharged himself with them, and that led to his insanity. As to Masonic conspiracies, you have P6 or P2. There was a book written about the Italian Masons that somehow they overtook the government and a lot of them were ousted. Getting into Albert Pike in the United States also was at the beginning of the Ku Klux Klan. And to his discredit, with today's diversity, he outlawed blacks and black Masons and that kind of thing. And also the writings of Albert Pike and the rituals were brought into the Costa Nostra. The mafia uses a lot of it in their ritual of Omate to make a brother, you know, make a what do you call it, a mafia brother.
Excuse me, one sec. Is there a question?
No, I'm just saying there is conspiracy out there.
No, yeah. I just wondered if you had a question. I mean, this is all interesting stuff.
Well, you were talking about there aren't too many Masonic conspiracies, but there are.
Oh, yeah, unfortunately, there is always going to be conspiracy theories about us. So what can we do? However open and transparent we are.
Right, and then you can get into the Illuminati. There, Rosencrantz was also Leonardo da Vinci. That was his other pseudonym.
Yeah, well.
So then you get into a whole nother conspiracy theory.
Of
But
course.
excellent lecture. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. We'll go to Sotiris.
Hi, Andrew. I was actually gonna comment on a grain of truth. Actually, not as much truth per se. More, I was gonna ask if it's sort of a twisting of the truth, because okay, yeah, Albert Pike did mention that, but let's also keep in mind that Scottish Rite Freemasonry, or as we say in the British Isles, Ancient Accepted Rite, or the Rose Cross, it's mainly influenced by Continental Masonry, which, in my humble opinion, au contraire to Masonry practice in England, Wales, and Scotland that I'm familiar with, is more of a left-hand path system, meaning it more focuses on the God within rather than the all-encompassing God under whose fatherhood we're all brothers. So essentially what I'm asking here is that maybe, could it be that this was actually a misinterpretation of a Gnostic / Luciferian theory that may actually have been intended to be spelled out by Albert Pike? This is just, just some thoughts that I've been having. I'm trying to put it in line here. That's my question.
I think things connected to Albert Pike. Albert Pike was a unique person. He was very diverse in his abilities. In fact, it's definitely going to be a subject of a whole lecture on his own. As I said very clearly, many of his beliefs are quite acceptable to us Masons, but there are a lot of his preachings, a lot of his thoughts have absolutely no connection with any of us.
Exactly.
And therefore,
exactly. And sadly, he's considered to be a godfather of Freemasonry to people that don't know about it.
He's not, I don't know about that. In my book, he is just at that time, at that window, he was an influential Mason, and his writings were noted by others who were not Freemasons. However, I mean, remember, he was the head of an organization where less than 20% of American Freemasons belong. So it was a minority order. And yet it's been sort of, the importance that's been given to his writings is disproportionate to, you know, the actual influence. And of course, most people don't believe most of what he wrote.
Agree 100%. Thank you. Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you, Sotiris. Brethren, can we please keep to the questions as we don't have very much time left? Othman?
Thank you very much, Andrew. After the campaign, enough is enough, and what we hear right now, and we are opening up and opening out our halls, our Masonic halls, and all over the internet and YouTube and everything. I think the vision forward is much better than before, and people start understanding what we are doing. The problem that we had before, and like Machiavelli said, if there is a wolf, you tell them about the bigger wolf that this wolf needs to protect you from. So you always have the bigger enemy, and it's because a Mason couldn't defend themselves, they end up being on the butt of the bigger enemy. The problem that we have right now is, I notice the more and more we are opening up, the more of the mystery of being a Mason disappear. I don't know what you think.
Yes. What can I say? You know, this subject of conspiracies and everything like connected is subjective. There is no yes, there's no right, there's no wrong. It is what it is. It is what it is. And people will believe what they choose to believe according to what they're at, where they're at, what their motives are, where they're heading, you know, if it suits them. Most of these conspiracy theorists are not, well, most of them are not Masons. There are a few who have written, ex-Masons who've written about the order, but mainly in the service of selling and promoting their own written words. And that's what I found. I looked into people ex-Masons who've written works, and much of it is, you can find it on the internet. There is nothing in Freemasonry you can't find on the internet. Everything. There's no hidden secrets of anything. So it's a bit of a nonsense to see that, you know, we keep secrets. There are no secrets. We know that. And I mean, once we've got world domination, it won't matter.
Do you think enough is enough? The campaign that we've started.
I think the enough is enough is basically to do not with conspiracies, but it's to do with bias by organizations like the BBC and the news media who ignore us. In the Mayor of London's parade that was held where Masonry in London had a float, they were showing the procession of the various floats, and they cut from the float in front of Freemasons to the one behind it deliberately. They made very little noise about the air ambulances that were provided, or the high-rise fire trucks that were provided, or all the other work we do. They choose not to, and this is why certainly in London, they are having a massive push on promoting and putting the word out there. Enough is enough.
Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you, Othman. We will go to Colin Jackson.
Thank you, Andrew. Loved it. One thing I'd like you to address, possibly. We've had roughly 100 years of failure to answer the criticism that's been thrown at us as Freemasons, and that is what's led to people accepting conspiracy theories in the general public. To what extent do you think that it's therefore true that so many of the modern terrorists, domestic ones, especially in America and on the continent, have ended up demonstrating a connection with Freemasonry, either by being around Freemasons or joining them, with everybody from the domestic bombers in America to Anders Breivik in Norway, finding that it's the very conspiracy theories that have not been addressed in the past that's attracted them to the organization?
To be honest, I think you've hit the nail on the head. It's what they don't know, they conveniently make it fit. And often it's purely conjecture, it's suggestion, innuendo, very, very fragmented pieces of information that people believe are connected to Freemasonry. There is no real connection, and you just got to say, where is the real connection? Where is the proof? And often it doesn't exist. It's just, you know, people's imagination, especially those who don't know anything about Freemasonry.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Colin. We will go to Mark.
Thanks, Andrew. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
It was a great lecture, thank you. Just going back to Albert Pike.
Listen.
His morals and dogma, he doesn't actually put any foundations on his notion that there's a prevalent belief in satanic worship. And then it gets repeated by Reverend George Oliver without any foundations. And then Mackay repeats what George Oliver said. And I've always wondered whether what Pike is actually referring to is the early trials of the Templars in or around 1307 at the behest of King of France, Philip, and the then Pope. So I was wondering whether it is a reference to those trials in the Knights Templars, and secondly, if not one, but all three of those, Pike, Oliver, and Mackay, had a compound effect in this belief that we mentioned, that we know that there's no foundation to, because it was never mentioned in the early French disclosures either.
Albert Pike's writings were cobbled together from his extensive knowledge of life. And it was a rambling. And people took, later, after his book was written, people took little parts of it to either repeat or to justify their viewpoint. That was all. I don't think that the actual book, Morals, I don't know why he chose the title he did, but it did, as I've said in the lecture, it did prompt his organization in the preface to his book to disassociate themselves from it being a religious or onerous dogma, and more a dogma in the literal sense of the word. Obviously, it's been misinterpreted over the years and used by people maliciously. It's a bit like what the news media does today to stories. They give it a twist in order to make it more interesting. And that's no different to this.
You're absolutely right. And of course, the goat as a deity had completely the opposite connotations. It love, honor, respect, and those sorts of values, versus the satanic drunkenness, maliciousness that it became purely as a result of a 13th century document. So yeah, I think we got sold down the river with that.
I think that, you know, there's for example, do you put any blame on the early scribes who translated the English Bibles, for example? in rewriting part of the text to suit their requirement for a fallen angel story. I mean, think of that. If they hadn't have done that, there wouldn't be anything to talk about in that.
It's a creative license, I think, Andrew.
Correct. They had no idea what the knock-on effect would be.
Yeah. Thanks very much, Andrew. Enjoyed it.
Thank you, Mark. We will go to our final question from Philip Rose.
Philip. Robin? You've got a Robin there.
Yeah. Right. Sorry, I was trying to get myself unmuted.
There we go.
Firstly, I'm sure I echo with everyone what a fascinating lecture it was. It occurs to me that the poor reputation that is sometimes engendered on Masonry is because, yes, we have certain things that we don't want to discuss, and people will fill in the gaps. And as Masons, we're opening up and opening up. But the other problem is there are other pseudo-Masonic or even non-Masonic organizations who are equally, if not more secretive, and their gaps are being filled in. And there is no reason why the people who may think bad of Masonry because they don't know the whole story will even think the same of these other organizations and associate us with this. And I was just wondering, what is it you think we could do to disassociate ourselves with these other organizations?
Well, already what's happening is it's felt that being open about our organization, being more open, is one way to dispel much of the mysticism behind us. Much of what we see today in conspiracy theories and our connection with other pseudo-Masonic orders or otherwise is in fact because people don't know. So by opening up our orders and being more open and transparent with the general public, the idea is that the mysticism won't be there anymore. It's like we won't be considered to be a secret society, which is really where it is. Any mention of a secret society, people assume naturally that we have, we're up to no good, just because we keep ourselves to ourselves. So by being open, we dispel that particular argument. And I just think that, people will always associate us with other pseudo-Masonic organizations. I mean, for example, in my lecture about witchcraft, the occult and Freemasonry, I explain that many of the initiation rituals for Gardnerian Wiccan witchcraft mirror our own initiation ceremonies. Well, I mean, there's a connection. Witchcraft, Freemasonry, and what I do in that lecture is prove or disprove the connection.
I think another example of this is the infamous P2 Lodge, which was founded by a person kicked out of Freemasonry. But the number of times that, because that's in the public domain, I've had to explain that to non-Masons is quite phenomenal.
Oh yeah, I mean, but people who are Masons find it, they laugh at it because they think it's crazy connection, but non-Masons take it very seriously. They do, because they don't know any different. They don't know any different. Anyway, thank you for your question.
Thank you so much, Philip. Brethren, that is all for today, as we have run out of time, and I will quickly announce our winners, Brian Randall and Tony Padley. Andrew, thank you so much again for coming back and giving us this exciting talk, and thank you, brethren, for all your questions. So all a very good evening, and I look forward to you all joining us next Tuesday for our lecture on Burns, Masonry, and that picture by Brother Ewan Notman. Stay safe, brethren. And see you next week, same time.
Good.
Thank you,
Andrew.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Thank you.